Bonjour et bienvenue sur la chaîne podcast du Sérif. Aujourd'hui, nous serons en duplex avec Dalia Ziada. J'ai le plaisir de recevoir une voix singulière et précieuse dans le paysage intellectuel et politique du monde arabe. Dalia Ziada est une figure du printemps arabe formée en Égypte et aux États-Unis. C'est une écrivaine primée, inlassable militante pour la paix, qui a donc été obligée de quitter son pays il y a 2 ans suite aux positions qu'elle a prises publiquement concernant le Hamas et le 7 octobre. Après avoir publiquement dénoncé donc les frères musulmans du Hamas, elle a reçu de multiples menaces et elle a été obligée de s'exiler aux États-Unis. Alors c'est un exil qui ne l'a pas empêchée, bien au contraire, de poursuivre son travail de politologue, un travail commencé depuis un certain nombre d'années, et aujourd'hui elle sillonne les campus américains pour contrer l'antisémitisme, pour promouvoir le dialogue israélo-arabe auprès des étudiants. Elle collabore avec l'ISGAP, Institute for the Study of Global Antisemitism and Policy, et s'intéresse en particulier donc à la menace islamiste aux États-Unis. Depuis 1 an, elle a rejoint le Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, où elle est chercheure donc senior. Donc j'ai invité Dalia Ziada, que j'ai découvert grâce à une autre invitée de ce podcast qui s'appelle Yasmine Mohamed, et je l'ai invitée en raison de sa très bonne connaissance de la confrérie des Frères musulmans qu'elle a connue donc en Égypte et aussi aux États-Unis, où elle est réfugiée aujourd'hui. So thank you, Dalia, to have accepted my invitation. I'm glad that you're here and to be able to talk to you, even if it's with distance. I'm very glad really that you will explain us the situation you are facing at the moment. You have been in exile now for, I think, almost 2 years. And I would like to know what is the situation now for you? How are you and how do you feel?
Thank you so much, Florence, for having me with you on your podcast. I've been following your work for so long now, and it's really impressive. I've learned a lot from your work, by the way, although we live in different countries, but I believe we face the same enemy, which is extremists. And I've learned a lot from your work, and I'm so excited you started this podcast so you can reach even more audience, and I'm even more happy to be on your podcast. Regarding your question, how am I? Well, I'm still running away from the extremists who wanted to kill me just for speaking up against a terrorist organization like Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, which have been, fighting with my whole adult life. And right now I'm based in the United States, trying to keep this fight going because, unfortunately, to my surprise, when I left Egypt, after, the big incident that happened to me, running for my life, literally, I came to the US thinking that, okay, I left the bad guys behind. But to my surprise, the bad guys are here too, in the United States, in Europe, in the West. And they are trying to do to these beautiful countries that are, democratic, open, free. They are trying to do to the Western countries the same thing they did to my home country, Egypt, which is destroying it from within using this Islamist narrative that has nothing to do with our modern day realities.
You talk about an incident, maybe for the French audience who doesn't know you yet. Can you explain what happened to you?
Sure. I'm an Egyptian. I grew up in Egypt, lived there my whole life, except for a few years I traveled to work and study in the United States, but my whole life was in Egypt. My work mainly focused on 2 things: democratization in Arab countries, especially in Egypt, my country. I was one of the leaders of the Arab Spring in Egypt. And I received actually international recognitions for that. It was a great time for me. And the other stream of my work is peace in the Middle East, especially focusing on Arab-Israel dialogue and Muslim-Jewish dialogue, which in my opinion is kind of looking at the bigger picture outside the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which we've been stuck into for so long, for decades now, for 7 decades or more now, and did not lead to anything other than violence and hatred and bloodshed. So this is another thing. So I've been doing this work, you know, my life was great. I was leading a think tank in Cairo.
Juste quand le 7 octobre est arrivé,
the October 7 attack in Israel on the Israeli civilians that was led by Hamas. And I was one of only 3 people in the entire 100 million population in Egypt. Imagine 100 million people, only 3 people dared to come out and condemn Hamas and say that they are a terrorist organization, and I was one of them. And to my knowledge, I'm perhaps the only one who said that I support Israel in its war against Hamas, like any country in the world would do if its citizens are attacked in such a way. I said this in Arabic, on a show that was in Arabic, and I also said that if Arab leaders are thinking straight, they should be backing Israel, not Hamas. And imagine saying this in October 2023, just 1 week after the attack happened, to an audience, an Arab audience, unfortunately, who were celebrating Hamas brutality, who were celebrating the kidnapping of the elderly, the killing of children, including toddlers, the torture of women and raping of women. They were celebrating that because it happened to the Jewish people, because the victims are Jewish. And they were celebrating Hamas as champions, as heroes, and everything you can imagine. This made me very scared myself, actually, as a woman first, and as a human being. How come, like, you know, I can exist among these people? So I wanted to educate them. I wanted to tell them that, no, what you're celebrating is wrong. You know, what I saw in the videos is different. This is not what you think it is. But to my surprise, many of them knew what it was, and they were happy that it happened this way. And when I said the truth, when I simply said the truth that Hamas is a terrorist organization, I received a horrible backlash that came first from radical Islamist groups, including Hamas, including the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and the Salafists, who are mostly active online. It started first, you know, by death threats, messages, actually not only death threats, but everything ranging from sexual harassment to death threats and everything in between. And then I said, okay, it's another wave of death threats that will disappear in a matter of days. It's not my first time, you know, to get this type of messages. But actually it didn't. It very quickly escalated. The Egyptian media, which is supervised by the Egyptian intelligence and the Egyptian state, picked up on the issue, and they portrayed me as a Zionist spy. They put my photo on a screen for days with the star David on it, and calling me like a Zionist spy. We exposed a spy, and she's a traitor, and all things you can imagine. It was horrible. It was really horrible. And then I'm speaking, like, it all happened in a matter of days, very, very quick. And then a group called the Salafists. Salafists are far-right extremists. They are even worse than the Muslim Brotherhood. They are much closer to the jihadist ideology, except that they operate among grassroots citizens in countries like Egypt and most North African countries quietly. Like, they practice violence quietly. Not openly like jihadist organizations do, but they adopt exactly the same extremist ideology. A group of them who are operating in my family neighborhood, they went to my family house looking for me. And my mother met with them, unfortunately, and she had to deal with them, which was horrific. This is the first time that such a thing happens. It was very bad. It was very scary, honestly. And thank God I was not there at that time. My mother called me. I was in my apartment in another neighborhood. And once she called me, I immediately contacted the security authorities to ask them to protect me, you know, like a normal citizen that deserves protection from these terrorist organizations. Unfortunately, the security authorities too were very hostile to me. And they said to me, we have nothing to do with you. You deserve what you get. And when I told them, how come? Aren't you also against Hamas? Because Hamas is also an enemy to Egypt. You know, Hamas also hurt Egypt. So the officer I was speaking to, he said to me, this is not the issue. The issue is that you said you support Israel. So for him, my crime was that I said that I support Israel. And we are speaking about a country that is having a peace treaty with Israel, economic relations with Israel, diplomatic relations with Israel, even cooperation in the Eastern Mediterranean, also security cooperation in Sinai. And so, I mean, it didn't make any sense to me. But then he hung up the phone and I knew now I am gonna end up in a very bad way. I mean, I will be killed for sure. And just overnight, you know, this was literally the scariest night in my life. You know, I tell you, I had to turn off the lights of my apartment all night so nobody knows that I am inside. So the next morning, I found the news. The news came up that there are 4 legal claims filed against me at the Attorney General office, accusing me of all things, like, you know, threatening Egypt's national security. Look at me, like, you know, threatening Egypt, committing high treason, spreading false information with the purpose to disturb public order, and the funniest of all, spying for the Israeli Mossad. So, I mean, imagine, like me, yeah, doing all of that. And the funny thing is that they considered someone like me who's fighting against extremists, who is supporting peace with a neighbor country like Israel, our immediate neighbor, literally our immediate neighbor, as a threat to national security, while at the same time they are encouraging Hamas sympathizers, Muslim Brotherhood sympathizers, and the Salafists, the extremists, and they don't see them as a threat to national security. And this, for me, was the biggest irony, actually. Mm. So I had to run away very, very quickly. Thank God, I had great friends from all over the world, actually, who came together and were able to evacuate me from Egypt in 5 hours, just a few hours before an arrest warrant was issued by the Attorney General. And thank God, I'm still free. I'm not killed. I'm still able to do the things that I love. I'm so grateful I survived this.
You're good. This is really good for you. And so you're happy where you are? You find another job, your other activities?
Yes, I'm very happy, actually, because I think, you know, they say sometimes things happen, you think that they are bad, but actually they end up being good. Like, it's God's plan. So I feel somehow there was a divine plan in the background that I come to the US here right now at this particular time, so I can be able to challenge the narrative that some Muslim and Arab groups, I call them Islamists, actually, not only Muslims, they are Islamist groups that are trying to promote a completely false narrative about Israel and about the Middle East among American citizens and among also students at American campuses in particular. So
before to go to this part in America, I would like to come back to Egypt. You said that you were 3 to fight against this Hamas terror. How do you explain you were so few people to address this problem in Egypt?
Yeah, actually, I tell you what happened, actually. For so long, Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, as you know, they were very active in Egypt, especially before the Arab Spring. There were some kind of deals between them and the Mubarak regime, at that time, the former dictator regime that ruled Egypt for 30 years until 2011. When the revolution happened. But before that, the Muslim Brotherhood existed under the eye of the regime. It's true they were a banned organization. Banned means prohibited from public work. But they were very active also. I mean, it's truly like on the paper they are banned, but actually they were very active in.
So you say that the Muslim Brotherhood is banned in Egypt, but they still carry on their activities.
Yes, that's true. In trade unions, among grassroots citizens, in mosques, in schools, they are everywhere.
Does it mean that they hide, or it's because the authority do not forbid it? Actually, they just say that it's forbidden, but they don't act.
Actually, it's a game, you know, the government plays. So they only see groups like the Muslim Brotherhood a threat, or the Salafists, you know, all these Islamist groups. And by the way, this applies to all other Arab countries. They see these groups as threat only when they are threatening their political positions. Like, for example, if they seek power, like state power, if they want to topple the regime, things like that. But if they are working on the grassroots citizens, if they are working on the grassroots level, I mean, on other levels, they wouldn't mind having them, you know?
So even if they are banned, they are free to do that.
Although they are banned by the state, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
No problem.
Although the Muslim Brotherhood are banned by the state, it means political banning. It means like they are not allowed to have political positions in the state.
Okay,
like,
but they can still exist.
Parliament, exactly. It's also hard to say that kind of, you know, the state is allowing them to exist, but we can say that the state is unable to stop them from existing. Why? Because the Muslim Brotherhood and other groups position themselves as grassroots movements. So they work on the level of the grassroots mainly, which the government is not popular among these groups, among the grassroots groups, because of economic failure, political repression, and so who is the alternative for these grassroots citizens are groups like the Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafists, especially that they provide them with services like, you know, hospitals or medical services, social services that compensate for the failure of the government in providing this. So that's why the Muslim Brotherhood and these Islamist groups in general, like, you know, the general umbrella of the Islamist groups, are very popular among grassroots citizens.
Maybe they're also useful for the government, because they do what the government doesn't do.
They are useful to an extent. They are useful only to the extent that does not threaten the political position of the government. Yeah, as soon as they are a threat, they are banned, they are, you know, like pushed away, they are, yeah. That's why actually, this is how the Muslim Brotherhood survived for over 1 century now. Just by playing this game with the government, you know, like, oh, you know, they say it even publicly, like, we don't seek power, we don't seek political power, we just want to continue to work on this level. And when the opportunity is there, like in the aftermath of the Arab Spring, for example, they jump on power. And then they are pushed out again by the military. And then they play the game again, as they are doing right now under the flag of supporting Gaza or the Palestinian cause or all of this stuff. They are coming back to the surface again. And they are playing the same game with the government by saying that we are here to absorb the outrage of the general public regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And thus the government is giving them the space. Why? Because it's serving them. But as soon as their power rises and they become a threat to the regime once again, the regime will push against them. And this is like a cycle that keeps repeating itself since 1920s.
Would you say, Dalia, that it is the same for the other countries who have prohibited the Muslim Brotherhood, like Emirates or other country or Saudi Arabia?
It's the same for other countries like Jordan, for example.
Jordan.
Like, Jordan, maybe also in Morocco, although they did not ban the Muslim Brotherhood yet, and Algeria. I mean, most of North African countries, the Muslim Brotherhood, they operate in the same way that I explained now that they operated in Egypt. However, in Gulf countries, the story is different. Why? Because in Gulf countries like United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and all of them, like all the 6 Gulf countries, the thing is that Gulf countries are mainly tribes turned into states, which means that the concept of the family leadership over the country is more strong than it is in more state model countries like North African countries, like Egypt, for example, or Jordan. I mean, yeah, Jordan is more monarchy, but also it's a state. It's a state, like it has a state structure that people can challenge the state, and so. In the Gulf, it's different. It's mainly a tribe turned into state. Like, what is Qatar? Qatar was a tribe, a family, turned it into state. What is UAE? It's the Zayed family turned it into state. Saudi Arabia itself, Al Saud, is also like a parent tribe to all the tribes that formed the Gulf region. And then it turned it into the Saudi Arabia, even named after this family, you know? So this is the politics of the Gulf that somehow protecting them against this influence of the Muslim Brotherhood on the grassroots citizens. Another important factor in Gulf countries is their economic wealth. The grassroots citizens, they don't have grassroots citizens that are poor and deprived, similar to Egypt, for example, or even in Jordan, or even in Algeria or so. They don't have this. So they don't have a vulnerable spot that the Muslim Brotherhood can infiltrate through to pressure them in a certain way, or to play with them this grassroots regime thing, you know, that they have in Egypt. So this is also making them immune. This does not mean there were not Muslim Brotherhood that appeared in these countries. There are actually many.
Yeah, otherwise, what would they prohibit them if they are not a threat?
They acted very quickly against them, and the things that the government's reaction, like, you know, arresting them and, you know, through repressive measures, but this was blessed by the general public. Unlike in Egypt, there was an opposition to how the Muslim Brotherhood was treated, because people somehow, especially among the poor and the rural areas, they related to the Muslim Brotherhood because they cannot relate to the more secular regime. Mm-hmm. And it is the Muslim Brotherhood that provides them with services, and so not the regime, you know. So there was an opposition to how they are being persecuted by the regime, by how the Muslim Brotherhood was targeted by the regime, I mean. In other Gulf countries, no. Actually, the general public was blessing this because they saw them as a threat to them as people, as citizens, not only a threat to the regime.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's interesting. So the conditions are met for the European countries and maybe for the United States to be infiltrated by the Muslim Brotherhood. What would make the European immune from these movements?
Oh, Florence, you know, the big question. I will, you know, I don't want to say it, but I have to say it. Unfortunately, Europe today is at a point that it cannot be immune to the influence of radical Islamists anymore. They are everywhere now. They are very influential. They have been building up for this moment for so long, for at least 4 decades. And they are getting it now. They are harvesting the fruit of their work while, you know, Europe was asleep. They have been doing this while Europe was asleep, thinking that what they are doing...
It is still asleep, and it is still blinded to to this the existence of this movement. I have colleagues in the university who say that the Muslim Brotherhood doesn't exist in Europe.
What? No, no way. What? Oh my God. So, wow, I don't know what to say, but let's put it this way. What's happening now, and here is the big irony. The Muslim Brotherhood as a group that's called the Muslim Brotherhood, and radical Islamism in general, although they are kind of active in some Arab countries, they are banned in most Arab countries. They are called terrorist organizations in Arab countries where they started their work. While in Europe and the United States and other countries, they are still hesitant to label them a terrorist organization. They even defend them as a moderate, quote unquote, moderate, group. And they are calling them more balanced compared to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And so, okay, that's true, but actually they are the source of this ideology. They are the source of this extremist ideology. And if the Muslim Brotherhood did not exist, Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the jihadist groups wouldn't exist either.
Yeah, you know, Dalia, their argument is to explain that they have changed. They arrive, Muslim Brotherhood arrived in 1970s, 80s, and then they have acclimated the new democratic society, and they are changing. Of course, it's not my opinion, but I'm really fighting against this very widespread opinion.
You know, Florence, actually, no, they have not changed it. They are like a snake. They adapt it to the system so they can survive, because they know that the system, this open society, free system, will not accept them if they show their real face, which actually, it's not even my words or my claim. Go back to a very interesting document that they wrote in 1981. It was after, the waves of Muslim Brotherhood who fled the Middle East to Europe and to the United States. And so in the 1960s and 70s, when they were cracked on by the new secular communist regimes that took power at that time, they fled the Middle East, especially in Egypt, where the Muslim Brotherhood started. They fled the Middle East. Where did they go? They went to Europe, the United States, and so. 20 years after they settled down and they started to think about, okay, what's our future? What should we plan next? They started to hold regular meetings for themselves. One of them actually was in the 1980s in Jordan. And in this meeting, they discussed a draft that's called the project. Yeah. And this is the project of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's like a 100-year plan of what the Muslim Brotherhood wants to achieve in this Western world. And you know what was the main motto of the project? It was to destroy the West from within. I am quoting, it's not my words. Destroy the West from within. This was the goal of the Muslim Brotherhood in this project. And in the project, they set up certain tools, like how they destroy the West from within. One of them was to adapt to the system they exist in. They have to adapt to this system and recruit as many supporters from within the system as possible. Though although they reject democracy, they don't even believe in the concept of nation state. If you understand, like the Islamist thought, don't believe in nation state. It believes in the ummah, the nation, the Muslim nation and the Muslim caliphate, and the idea of Muslims ruling over everyone else. I call it Muslim supremacy. So it's kind of a Muslim supremacy. This is what they believe in. So they don't believe in an equal world, that everyone is happy, everyone is, coexisting and so. So this is their goal. How to achieve this goal? Adapting to the system they are living in, including democratic systems that they totally reject and hate, and weaponizing this democracy to destroy this democracy, weaponizing the American democracy, like knowing the system from within, hiring
the subversion process.
Exactly, the subversion. Hiring their daughters and sons in important positions inside the government system so they can destroy it from within and so on. And we are seeing this very clearly now in the United States.
You talk about this plan of 100 years, but where is this plan? Can we read it? Because, of course, the people who doesn't want to believe that the Muslim Brotherhood are still acting said that this was made up by CIA.
Oh no, actually yes. Some wrote wrote things like that, but actually I would refer them to two things. One, the project itself is everywhere, like it's available now with the translation of okay,
maybe you can send me the reference and I will put it in the description.
It's it's available by the translation of the US, like this project document, and it's translated into English by the US government because it was included in a case, big case here that happened in 2008. It's called the Holy Land Foundation case about some Islamist NGOs here that funded Hamas. It's very interesting. But actually, the proof that it's not made up by the CIA or any other agency is that it was first mentioned in a book by one of the important leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood, Azzam Tamimi. He wrote a book about the birth of Hamas, and he speaks about how Hamas was born in the 1980s and he referred to this project, he referred to this document, these attempts of creating a representative of them in the inside Israel so it can, operate on behalf of them and they can recruit supporters to this agent of them in the West, in Western countries. And this takes me to a very important point, that many people tend to ignore, which is the centrality of the Palestinian cause to the activities of the Muslim Brotherhood in the West. Since the very beginning, since the time of Sayyid Qutb, believe it or not, the 1960s, with the first Muslim Brotherhood immigrants to America and Europe, they, sorry, there is a plane, so.
Yeah, I can hear.
With the first waves of immigration, Muslim Brotherhood immigration from the Middle East to America and Europe, the issue of the Palestinian cause was very, very central to a central tool that they purposefully used to recruit support among Muslim minority communities in the West, glue them together around this cause, and also attract support from Marxist leftist groups. Why they did so? Because it worked for them in the Middle East. It worked for them in Egypt, for example. It was not possible for the Muslim Brotherhood, not in their dreams, they can't get the support of Marxist leftist groups unless it was for the Palestinian cause. Yeah. But it happened, so they saw this red-green alliance successful in the Middle East. So when they came to the West, they thought, well, it is a good tool. Because actually, if you think about it, it has, a humanitarian cause within it. Because, there are people who are oppressed that needs to be, rescued. So this narrative very much entertains the Marxist leftist side, which worked like magic here, as you can see in the West. On the other hand, it's a good tool also to gain the sympathy of the Muslim communities, who are mostly, by the way, most of the Muslim communities in the West before the Muslim Brotherhood, they were just scattered individuals. Islam for them was a very individual practice. It was not, they were not organized in very clear groups. And actually most Muslims right now are like this, except that the Muslim Brotherhood in the West have given them a cause to recruit them around it and rally their support around it. and give them the feeling or the delusion that they have the power, a power again, to influence these Western communities that they feel as strangers in. They cannot merge, for example, in a, like, for the average Muslim, even the one who's not an Islamist or anything, it's a struggle to merge in France, for example. Very free, very secular, individual freedom is #1. It's very hard for a Muslim person to adapt to that. So when the Islamists come and say, no, forget about merging in the French society, we're giving you something more important, much bigger, which is Islam, you know, join our Islamist movement, and you will have the influence to change this very secular, very liberal societies that you cannot adapt with, you know? So of course people follow them. And actually this is so interesting because at the beginning, sorry for that, playing again. It's very interesting because how the Muslim Brotherhood was founded, actually, it was founded as a reaction to the liberal and secular lifestyle in Cairo at that time. In the 1920s, it was the liberal era. Like, you know, we have theaters, we have people from all over the world, like, coming to Cairo just to enjoy themselves. Peaceful, freedom, secular. It was totally secular, a secular state, liberal, secular, and so. The grassroots people, I mean the poorer people in rural areas, which is the majority of Egypt, more than 70%, were unable to adapt with this. They don't see themselves in this, they can't adapt. So Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, he did not start his movement from Cairo. He started it from a very small town in eastern Egypt, very close to Sinai, very eastern marginalized town called Ismailiyah. And he went there, he met with the people and told them exactly that. I have a more powerful tool that I can give them to you, which is, you know, being an Islamist, joining my movement. And forget about, you know, this secular government, this secular state that you cannot adopt with. And when you become a good Muslim, a good Islamist, a good Muslim Brotherhood, a good Muslim brother, you know, you will be able to subvert this secular systems that you don't like. They did so in Egypt, they did so in the Middle East, and right now, as we speak, they're doing this.
How do you explain that they hated us, a regime, a Western regime that they did not know really?
The problem with the West is that it is too idealistic. I call it the religion of the West. What is the religion of Western countries? It's freedom. It's individual freedom. It's liberalism. It's democracy. And yeah, so it's for them, it's hard. And also, you know, Western countries did not get to this point of freedom, liberalism, and secularism easily. You had your own struggle over history too. So you value it very much. You value this very much. And you don't want to do anything that threatens that this freedom and liberalism and democracy will be taken away. So perhaps the decision makers in the West at that time, or people even observing, were thinking like, okay, yes, we have the Muslim Brotherhood among us, but perhaps they are not as extremist as people say they are. Perhaps they don't want to destroy our democracy or anything. We can see them, you know, already adapting to this democracy, already, you know, running for elections or maybe seeking positions in Congress or in Parliament in Europe or so. And so they are seeing them somehow adapting to the system, and they don't understand that this is part of their plan to subvert the system from within. So in love for democracy and liberalism and secularism, they gave them the space to do so, without knowing that actually the end goal is to destroy the West, destroy the Western regimes, which they are doing now. Yeah.
The thing is that, I mean, some have alerted 20, 30 years ago against this plan of Muslim Brothers. but nobody wants to believe them. How do you explain that the Western countries are still blind to it?
I think they believe them. It's not about, like, you know, they don't know or they don't believe, but I believe somehow it's in the interest of the politicians not to lose the support of a huge Muslim population that exists now if they take any action against the Muslim Brotherhood. Because over time, what happened is that the Muslim Brotherhood established themselves as the representatives of these Muslim communities. Because, as I told you, these Muslim communities are not even organized. They are just scattered individuals or families that look at Islam as an individual practice. It has nothing to do with the society or politics. But what happened is that the Muslim Brotherhood came and gave it a political meaning, gave Islam a political meaning, and made these Muslim communities a political bloc that can make a candidate win or lose.
But how did it succeed to from the different population coming from different countries with different projects? How they managed to put them together?
Yeah, actually, I call it like points of entryism or infiltration in the Western society. Over time, the Muslim Brotherhood were waiting, like, you know, like waiting for a prey, like, you know, like an animal waiting for a prey. They were waiting for moments where they can politically and socially infiltrate into the Western societies and represent themselves as the speakers of or speakers on behalf of the Muslim community. One of them, which is very, very clear here in the US, for example, was the 9/11 attacks in New York. What happened at that time? People did not know much about Islam in the West, you know, or in the US in particular, if we're talking about the US. They did not know much about it. And there were no proper representatives of Muslims who can come out and say, you know, this is what we are, this is what we believe. So what happened is that the Muslim Brotherhood immediately, which was building up for this moment for so long before that, they jumped in, especially a group called CARE, the Council for American Islamic Relations, very notorious one. And they are big supporters of Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. They were also indicted in the case, in the Holy Land Foundation case that spoke about supporting Hamas. And so they jumped in immediately and went to the Bush administration at that time and told them, we represent the Muslims. Let's speak to you about Muslims. And it was shocking that President Bush was standing in the White House and next to him, the CARE representatives. Mm-hmm. This was one of the biggest moments of terrorism. The next one, or actually there are several that happened over time, but actually the most recent one is October 7, is what has the October 7 attack. Now they are the ones who are dominating the narrative about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, who are leading protests on American campuses and European campuses. Like, see who is leading the protests here? Students for Justice in Palestine, AMB, American Muslim, I forgot what P stands for, but the AMP, you know, like all these Muslim Student Council and so on. So all these groups that are actually Muslim Brotherhood originally, or somehow affiliated to the Muslim Brotherhood in one way or another, although they don't announce very clearly that they are Muslim Brotherhood. Mm-hmm. So
they will never, of course, because as you know that it has to keep the secret, the organization, otherwise they will be jailed.
Exactly, but they are depending on also the secrecy of the organization helps it with adaptation. Like, for example, one of the challenges why it's hard to designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization right now, because there is no one thing that you can hold and say, this is the Muslim Brotherhood. You know, it's still...
Yeah. There is not a problem with forbidding the Muslim Brotherhood. Is like people like us, if we want to study Muslim Brotherhood and say this one is close to Muslim Brotherhood, this one is a member of. If it's forbidden, then we will be quoted. We will have we will be harassed by these people and will not be able to work.
Exactly. It's so ironic what you said, because it's the opposite. Like it's people like us, if we speak against the Muslim Brotherhood, we will be punished for it.
Exactly.
Not the opposite.
Yeah, because they are so powerful now. The only thing I don't explain is why...
I don't use the word moderate, actually. But the general Muslims are the most victims of radical Islamists. But let me tell you why. Okay, this may be a little controversial, so let me...
Take a breath.
Let me have, some water and prepare for it, because it's I don't know how to explain it in a way that's not very controversial. The problem is that the thing with Islam, I call it the problem with Islam, actually. Islam itself as a religion, it has a problem that makes it very hard for average Muslims to break away from its political and, to some extent, violent context. Only very few people I know were able to do that. Thank God I'm one of these people who were able to see things for what they are and try to reform it, at least for myself, so I can adapt with it. But the general majority of Muslims are still stuck in this trap. So what is this problem exactly? The problem is that, first, Islam is a political religion. Islam is not a spiritual religion. Islam is a political, tribal religion. It started as a mission to spread the influence of the tribe of Prophet Muhammad over everyone else first of all, in his local context in the Arabian Peninsula, and then his companions later who invaded North Africa and led Islamic conquests to North Africa and Asia. Their mission was just to follow on what Prophet Muhammad did. Prophet Muhammad is not called a spiritual leader. He was not a spiritual leader, actually. He was someone who would carry a sword and get in war, lead troops. He was a military commander. He was a political leader. And actually, until today, they call him the Imam al-Mujahideen, which kind of the father of Mujahideen, the father of jihadists. And people have pride in that, when they say this, including average Muslims. So for most Muslims, when they see that, and also let's keep in mind whom he was fighting against. He was not fighting against bad people. He was fighting against people just because they refused to believe in his message. And his companions did the same thing after that. They fought and led conquests on other countries. They killed people, they, fought against them because they refused to adopt this message. For nothing else, imagine for a moment. So this is a big problem with Islam. The biggest problem is that it did not go through the reform that other Abrahamic religions went through, Christianity and Judaism. Over time, yes, these religions also had their own problems, but they went through reform so they can adapt to the modern day life. They can be religions that modern people today can easily adapt. Why? Because they were reformed to adapt to this time, to this era we are living in. Islam, no, this is not the case for Islam. Islam is the only religion that rejects and resists adaptation. Islam still insists on looking backwards to the time of the Prophet, the time of the companions of the Prophet, and wants to go back to this era of conquests, of invading other countries, of building the caliphate system. That's why the narrative of the Muslim Brotherhood and these extremist groups actually finds muse or somehow is somehow accepted to a certain degree by the average Muslims. That's why actually is part of their influence, including...
Would you say the average, would you say the majority?
No, it's not the majority. Yes, the average Muslims, like the normal Muslims, the people who were born to Muslim families and grew up found themselves Muslims. So this narrative appeals to them. Why? Because what they learned in their schools, in their mosques, about their prophet, about their the companions of, like, you know, our ancestors, what we learned about them is that they did exactly the same like the jihadists do, the same like the Muslim Brotherhood does, and so that's why this narrative appeals to them. But actually, you said something very interesting, how to differentiate between different Muslims. So Muslims are not the same in any way, by the way. There is a huge range of Muslims. I call it a spectrum. Somehow, if we imagine it like a spectrum, we have at the center, they call themselves the centrist, moderate Muslims, but I call them the official Islamists. These are the Islamist organizations that are affiliated to governments, like Al-Azhar in Egypt, for example. It's not centrist by any means, but it's very good in playing the game, like, you know, balancing its rhetoric sometimes, you know, in order only for political reasons. So this is the people in the center, the official Islamists. And then when we go to the right, or the right this way, for the screen's sake, if we go to the right of the spectrum, we have the Muslim Brotherhood, the Salafists, which are more on the right, and then the violent jihadists like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Daesh, you know, all these groups, they are on the very far right. If you go to the left, there is also a huge spectrum of Muslims, including first reformist Muslims, people who want to do reform to Islam. We have reform to the Islam as we know it, so they can adapt with it. You have Sufis. They are more liberal and more focused on the spiritual side. I am a Sufi myself, and my father was. It's more liberal, more about individual liberalism and direct relationship with God without any intermediaries, you know, like it's about love. It's more about love, Sufism. And then on the very far right, you have on the very far left, you have the liberal Muslims, the ones who still identify as Muslims, maybe as part of their identity, but actually they don't practice Islam. They are more secular, and so, and they are kind of, you know, the people who you can see they are more adaptive to Western communities. They can exist in these Western communities without any problem, without feeling that they are scattered from within, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand this spectrum, Dalia, but why do we will not see them in a protest against Hamas, for example? Why are they silent? You said yourself that you were just 3 against what happened the 7th of October. So, I mean, is it true there is a spectrum, or is it true that there is a few singular people and most of the Muslims remain silent?
This is absolutely true, Florence. Actually, the majority of Muslims, the people on the left side of the spectrum we just mentioned, at least I know that they are against Hamas, against the extremist ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, against even the extremist narrative of official Islamist organizations like Al-Azhar and so. However, there is a fear factor here we have to consider. You know, at the time when I was leaving Egypt, you know, receiving death threats for the work I'm doing and people wants to kill me, I was also receiving messages of support until today, by the way. I still receive messages of support from young Arabs, young Muslims, who are telling me you are doing the right thing, but we just can't do the same. We can't even show you support in public. Even
but I understand Dalia, this spectrum you describe is probably existing in Egypt, but if you look at Europe, or in America, it's all around Islamist. That there is almost no Muslim who are liberal, or they are out of Islam, but they don't say it.
That's true, because the radicalization process that happened over the past 4 decades, since the Muslim Brotherhood decided to do this project, make this project happen, yes, there was a very huge radicalization process that turned average Muslims, very normal people that can easily merge into Western societies, and so turned them into Islamists, made them more polarized on each other. And isolated.
And victimhood and victimization, Islamophobia, and so on.
And also isolated from the rest of the society, which is very dangerous, of course.
Yeah, I mean, this is a device, the Islamophobia struggle, which is very efficient and which obviously doesn't work in Arab countries, in Muslim countries. What do you think of this? What is it a new weapon from the Muslim Brotherhood, or is the victimhood in the DNA of the Muslim Brotherhood?
Of course, it's one of the factors that gave kind of legitimacy to the Muslim Brotherhood, is always playing the role of the victim. That we are, challenged by some group or so. Even this is also giving them influence on Muslim minorities or communities of Muslim minorities in the West by just amplifying or magnifying this victimhood sentiments. And one of the ways to do that is by inventing this Islamophobia concept. Islamophobia is very recent, by the way. This term is very recent. It only appeared in the 90s. And the purpose was by the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, by the way, which is also one of the extremist Islamist official organizations, kind of. And it very much plays on this concept of one ummah, one nation, one caliphate, and so on. Except that it's official and supported by some big Arab states. So they invented this concept of Islamophobia, and the purpose, actually, of course, the announced purpose of this is to protect Muslim communities in the West. Protect them from what? They are, if you think about it, Muslims in the West are enjoying freedoms and enjoying a lifestyle they cannot
to protect them from freedom.
I tell you, I can bike here, for example. I can bike. I love biking so much. I can bike every day, and nobody cares, what I'm doing. If I do this in Egypt, I've never biked in Egypt since I was 13 years old. Why? Because I was harassed when I was 13 years old, and biking, I was harassed by people with long beards who prevented me from doing so, and thus my mother decided I will never do it again. And I cannot do it in Egypt, for example, but I'm enjoying it here. See, very, very simple thing, very, very small thing. So Islamophobia came out to emphasize this sense of victimhood. And who created it? Actually, the Muslim Brotherhood. And they are using it as a weapon against any and everyone. And also to emphasize this, any and everyone who opposes them, by the way, including liberal Muslims and reform Muslims like myself. They even at one moment called me Islamophobic. I don't know how, but at one moment they did. So this is one thing. And the other thing, it's also helping them gain legitimacy in when speaking to policymakers in these Western countries. So, for example, they can approach a policymaker and say, we want laws or legal action that supports action against Islamophobia, and they get support for that, and thus they get influence inside the government. It's all a game. It's all a very well-designed game. And right now they are using it against. We saw first in the woke movement, they used it against everyone who spoke against Muslims. And emphasizing this idea that we are also the oppressed, and we are oppressed by the white supremacist oppressors, They also played the same game of the Marxist left, the progressive left, as they call themselves. And they played their same game using this word, Islamophobia. And the irony here is that when they first wanted to invent Islamophobia, they actually derived most of the concept or build on a concept that already existed before, which is anti-Semitism. And they just changed the word, removed anti-Semitism, and adapted everything, the description, the way it's spread, everything, made it Islamophobia, which does not make any sense. Because, okay, anti-Semitism is real because the Jewish people is really a minority in this world. And there was credible incidents of discrimination against them over history, like very well credible incidents of discrimination that very well documented, that reached to killing millions of people, like in the Holocaust, for example, or the October 7 attack recently that killed like 1,200 people in one day. So, but the Muslim, like the Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood and this group took it and they adapted it to make also like close to 2 billion Muslims right now appear as oppressed, appear as victims, as a minority, you know, which does not make any sense.
So let's go to America. You have been spending quite a lot of time in the campus, meeting students, American students. What's your feeling about their knowledge on this threat? What do you think they have understood?
Yeah, so you know, one of the things I'm very proud of, I like bragging about it, so forgive me if I sound like, you know, very proud, is that I was able to be here at the time when the Muslim Brotherhood wanted to hijack the narrative on the Middle East at American universities in particular. They literally wanted to brainwash the minds of an entire generation of the students who are studying.
But you arrived.
Yeah, thank God. Yeah, you know, like I just came on the right time. So I was able somehow to break through this narrative and provide an alternative, more credible, more authentic narrative about the regions that I know, the regions that I lived in my whole life, you know, and that has nothing to do with this Islamist rhetoric that is only serving Hamas, that's only serving the Muslim Brotherhood. So in this academic year alone, I visited 58 campuses.
Whoa.
And yeah, it's a huge number, you know, inside the United States.
You're lucky because, you know, me in France, I cannot go in any university.
Wow.
They don't want me to come. And if you say something that you are presenting in America, you will not go in a university in France today.
Really? But why? Like, they hate what
because
you
they don't want to hear about that. They just don't want to hear about that. So you have a few students who protest, and then the president of a university will close the university, and you will not be able to go.
Wow.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
You know? Wow. It's so scary because actually I faced some of these protests too, but actually the administrations of the universities here were very brave. Like they insisted, like, you know, we will continue, we'll keep doing it. And what's even more disturbing to me was that I learned from some of the Arab and Egyptian students who came to my lectures is that they were harassed by groups like the SGB, I call them the Kufaya groups on campus, by all the pro-Palestinian groups that if they go to my lecture, they will be isolated and they will not speak to them. They were threatening them, really. And I'm sure this happened with other speakers too, with other people who visit their campuses too, and who have the potential to, or who can provide a narrative that challenges the Muslim Brotherhood narrative.
Yeah.
So it's not only harassing me, it's also harassing the students. But thank God, I mean, I was able like to break through all of that and have an influence. And one of the big victory moments for me, I call it a victory moment because it was so unbelievable, was when a group of young people, you know, they are very diverse, Arabs and non-Arabs, who came to me. They are members of the SGB, with the Students for Justice in Palestine, which is kind of backed by the Muslim Brotherhood. They came to me after the lecture. Of course, we had our debate in the lecture and so, but then after the lecture, they came to me and said, you are right about everything you said, and we want to continue to support the people in Gaza because we feel sorry for them, but we want to do this without supporting Hamas. So what do you advise us to do? How can we do this?
Whoa.
This for me was a great moment. I was
Yes.
very happy. I was very happy when this happened because, okay, it's true they are not on the side of Israel yet, which is fine, but they are breaking away from supporting Hamas.
Yeah. What is very helpful, maybe in your case, it is you're from Egypt, you're a Muslim, and you wear the hijab. So
Exactly.
I think, of course, it's very helpful because it breaks all their preconception.
Exactly. I think this was one of the main factors that made me more approachable to them. They can speak with me about things. I mean, the Arab and Muslim students, they can speak with me about things they cannot speak about with their professors, for example, or with their even colleagues from the other side of the aisle or so.
But you need to come to Europe, and I hope you will come to France, to
I
Paris.
will.
Please tell me if it's the case, if you're traveling around. I know for now it's not a possibility for you, or maybe it's complicated, I don't know. But please, if any possibility, come to Paris, and we will really welcome you. What do you think, for ending this very nice and very interesting, fascinating conversation? What do you think we can hope in the next years? Do you think this generation, the young generation, is? I mean, there's nothing we can do, and we have to expect the next generation. Or do you think we still are able to change their mind like you did for these young students?
You know, actually, we are at a very critical moment right now in the West. And I tell you from my experience in Egypt, now we have two options. Either to, actually, I tell you from my experience in Egypt is that now we have the spotlight on the Muslim Brotherhood and their actions. And there is a controversy created around them, especially with the harassment of Jewish students, Jewish people in Western communities that has nothing to do with what's happening in the Middle East. It's not justified, you know. We are seeing some form of new neo-anti-Semitism, if we can call it, like NEO anti-Semitism. It's kind of a new form of anti-Semitism. So if now we have the spotlight on these Islamist groups that were hiding their true face for so long. They were wearing a mask. Now they have been unmasked. They showed us the real face. And there are two options now. Either to sit and cry and like, oh, how comes they came here? Like, you know, we will never be able to get rid of them or so, which I think it's not true, and we should not be stuck in this point. Or the other side is just to help them reveal their true nature more and more, so people are educated about who they really are. Of course, what's happening right now in America, if you can see, the Trump administration is taking very serious action against these groups, which is amazing. By the way, I totally support that. Except that my fear is that it's happening in a way that is, you know, as the Italians say, don't throw the water with the baby in it.
Baby, yeah.
Yeah, you know. So kind of, you know, the Trump administration is doing that very, very good action against the radical Islamists and the Islamist groups like the Muslim Brotherhood and so. However, my fear is that they could be throwing the water with it, the bath water, which is democracy, human rights, civil rights, individual freedoms, and so. Freedom of speech, number one, of course. So this has to be done very carefully, but it will eventually lead to something. It will eventually lead to purifying Western societies from these extremists who literally hijacked the West, especially in Europe. In Europe, it's very scary. It's very, very scary, for God's sake. I mean, it's nothing compared to America. In Europe, it's terrible. It's terrible. And I think it's time for Europe to take action on this now. Not collectively, of course, but at least in individual countries has to start taking action, and it will build up eventually.
If you wanted to give some advice of reading of activists or people who are very interesting and talk about what you are talking, what would you name, for example?
Number one, challenge the narrative. Don't be hesitant. Don't let things like Islamophobia or this nonsense stop you. No, you are not Islamophobic when you speak about extremist Islamists. No, no way. Actually, I am a Muslim and I speak against them. There is nothing like this. There is nothing actually called Islamophobia.
So makes a difference between Islam, Muslim and Islamist, and Islam and Islamism?
Actually, don't even worry much about that. You have the right to criticize any religion, and Islam and Muslims have to learn that it is okay to be criticized. I mean, why? Okay, how many people criticize Christianity? How many people criticize Judaism? Everywhere. You'll find books about it. You'll find books even by Jewish people criticizing Judaism, Christian people criticizing Christianity. It's okay. Except for Muslims, whenever anyone says anything about it, it's like, oh, you did like a big crime, you have to be... It's wrong. It's wrong. Muslims have to accept that, have to accept the fact that it is okay to be criticized, that it is okay that Islam is being criticized. It's fine. It's fine. So do this. Don't hesitate. Even pressure more and more now, because Islam has done, or Muslims in the West has done a lot of wrongs in the past 2 years, and they need to be held accountable for it, at least through academic criticism. It's fine. It's, you know, I totally support that. So don't fret much about Islamophobia. Do what you think is the right thing. The second thing is that really keep the spotlight on the Muslim Brotherhood, on the real face of the Muslim Brotherhood. They are now showing us the real face. Keep the spotlight on them. Emphasize what they're doing. Amplify it. We have social media, you know, we can use it just to spot what they're doing and keep it in under the eyes of the world. Don't hide it. Don't justify for them. Don't fall for the narratives that, you know, out of supporting the Palestinians or out of supporting the Gazans, they have the right to wreak havoc here in Western countries. It doesn't make any sense. And the third thing is to understand that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not the central issue in the Middle East. There is a lot of other problems. Look at Sudan, look at Syria, look at even like, you know, North African countries, look at even Gulf countries. They have their own struggles as well. Look at the Eastern Mediterranean, Lebanon. I mean, we have Libya. Oh my God, the civil war in Libya. So we have so many other problems to focus on if you really want to stand up for a humanitarian cause. It's not about supporting, actually supporting Hamas and the Islamic Jihad and these groups is not a humanitarian cause. It's an act of espousing terrorism. So this has to be kept in mind. The last thing is to break free from the influence of the Marxist left. It's as equally dangerous to the Western communities as Islamists. You know, I'm not speaking about the good left, about the good liberals, the classic left, the classic liberals. I'm speaking about modern day Marxist leftists, the progressive left, as they call themselves, who cannot view the world other than a group of minorities who have to hijack everything in the state. Otherwise, they are not, it's not a fair society. You know, progressive left groups here, if you go to their websites and need like their mission statements, you will be very scared. They are exactly the mission statements of Islamists. Things like destroying America, destroying the American imperialism, crazy things like that, which plays very well in the hands of radical Islamists, you know, whom, by the way, as soon as America is destroyed and the free societies are destroyed, they will go immediately and kill these Marxist leftists who supported them along the way. They will not tolerate them.
They did it in Iran, yeah, of course.
Exactly. They will not tolerate them, you know. All the LGBTQ communities here who, and in Europe as well, who are now supporting Hamas, they cannot live under Hamas for 5 minutes. They will be immediately killed if they go there, or even by their friends, even their friends who join them in protests, and so they hate them for nothing other than being an LGBTQ person. But they are hiding it because it's serving their purposes. So I believe it's very important for Western scholars, Western activists to keep this in mind. And also, finally, like the last thing is to find moderate, not moderate, I don't know what is the right word for it, but liberal, reformist Muslims, and amplify their voices, join forces with them, and try to do something together, because this is what really is going to make change happen, you know, by
there are also the apostate who want to leave Islam, which is absolute liberty they can have, and they are very efficient to talk about the excess of Islamism, and we should also protect them.
Absolutely, absolutely. The ex-Muslims, you mean the people who were Muslims?
Ex-Muslims, yeah.
Yeah, actually, of course. They are, I know some of them are good friends of mine, and they are amazing people.
Yeah, I have in this podcast, I interview Yasmin Mohamed, that you both know.
Yeah. She's
lovely, and she's a very clever person and very nice.
Actually, Yasmin was also one of the early people who amplified my voice, like helping me, like being heard and being. So yeah, I mean, we have, as liberal Muslims and as ex-Muslims and as also Western scholars and academics and activists, we have so much in common that we can build on and do something that really can change the narrative.
Thank you, Dalia. Very nice to have you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Florence. It was an honor to be with you, and I'm very excited we made it happen.
Thank you.